The warning lights flashed red across the massive command center of Nexus Prime. Captain Zexhai had never seen anything like it in his 300 years of service. The ancient communication array, buried deep in the station's core, had suddenly come alive after sitting silent for 500,000 years. "Sir, you need to see this," called out Communications Officer Veltar, her 4 arms working frantically across multiple control panels. "The signal is using authentication codes from the old archives, codes that shouldn't exist anymore." Zexhai moved quickly across the bridge, his scaled feet clicking against the metal floor. Around him, dozens of different alien species worked, at their stations, all part of the great galactic concordat that ruled over 847 different worlds. The concordat had brought peace and order to the galaxy for thousands of years, uplifting primitive species and bringing them into the fold of civilization. "What kind of codes?" he asked, leaning over Veltar's shoulder to look at the strange symbols flowing across her screen. "That's the problem, sir. According to the computer, these belong to a species called humans from a planet called Earth. But the records show they went extinct 500,000 years ago." Zexhai felt his blood run cold. He had heard stories about the humans in the military academy. Though most officers treated them like ghost tales, they were supposed to be one of the Concordat's greatest failures, a primitive species that had been given too much too quickly. "Bring up their file," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked peaceful, almost boring. Hard to believe something important had once lived there. Species designation: human. The computer's voice echoed through the bridge. Homeworld: Earth, Sol system. Status: extinct. Reason: terminal debt default and abandonment of Concordat membership. The file continued to scroll, showing images of strange bipedal creatures with only 2 arms and no scales, fur, or other obvious protections. They looked fragile and weak compared to most galactic species. The humans were uplifted in Galactic Standard Year 847-392. The computer continued. They were provided with faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, medical, technology, and star charts to 12 nearby systems. In exchange, they agreed to standard uplift terms: resource extraction quotas, military service obligations, and technology licensing fees. Zexhai knew how the system worked. The Concordat would find a primitive species with potential and give them the tools to join galactic civilization. But those tools came with a price. The uplifted species would spend centuries, sometimes millennia, paying back the debt for their advancement. It was fair, really. Nothing in the universe was free. "What happened to them?" asked Veltar, her large eyes focused on the display. "After only 50 years of membership, the humans disappeared," the computer replied. "They abandoned their colonies, took several pieces of advanced technology without authorization, and vanished beyond the galactic rim. Their debt at the time of disappearance was 412 billion galactic standard units." Zexhai let out a low whistle. That was enough money to buy entire star systems. No wonder the Concordat had written them off as dead. "But sir," Veltar said, pointing at her screen, "if they've been gone for 500,000 years, what's their debt now?" The computer began calculating, numbers flying across the screen too fast for even enhanced minds to follow. Interest rates, compound calculations, late fees, abandonment penalties. The final number made everyone on the bridge go silent. Current debt total: 847,632,491,000,000 galactic standard units. "That's impossible," breathed Navigation Officer Cothron from across the bridge. "That's more money than exists in the entire galaxy." Zexhai stared at the number, his mind struggling to process it. The humans owed more than the combined wealth of every planet, every corporation, every government in Concordat space. It was a debt that could never be repaid, not in 1,000,000 years. "What does the message say?" he asked quietly. Veltar's hands shook as she pulled up the transmission. It was short, just a few words in the old human language that the computer translated into standard Concordat speech. "Debt acknowledged. Payment delivery commencing. Prepare your ledgers." The bridge fell completely silent. Outside the massive windows, stars twinkled peacefully in the darkness of space. Nothing looked different, but somehow everything had changed. "Sir," whispered Weapons Officer Grixnell, "that's not possible. The humans are dead. They have to be dead. Nothing could survive alone beyond the rim for 500,000 years." Zexhai wanted to agree, but the evidence was right there on the screen. The authentication codes were real. The message was being broadcast on frequencies that only the Concordat knew about. Whoever sent this knew things that only humans should. No. Get me the High Council, he ordered, all of them right now. As Veltar worked to open communication channels across the galaxy, Zexhai found himself staring out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, something that claimed to be human was coming home. After 500,000 years, they wanted to pay their debt. The question that terrified him was simple. How exactly did they plan to do it? Within hours, the entire Galactic Concordat was buzzing with the news. On world after world, leaders gathered in emergency sessions. The humans were supposed to be a footnote in history, a cautionary tale about what happened when primitive species couldn't handle the responsibility of galactic citizenship. But if they were really coming back, if they had somehow survived, and grown strong enough to travel the impossible distances between galaxies, what did that mean for the Concordat? What had they become during their long exile in the dark? Admiral Vorthak of the Concordat Defense Force pulled up tactical reports from the old archives. The humans had been decent fighters, but nothing special. Their ships had been standard, Concordat designs, their weapons unremarkable. They should have died out there in the cold, empty space between galaxies. Should have, but apparently hadn't. How long until they arrive? Asked High Counselor Yethrai during the emergency session. Unknown, replied the head of Concordat Intelligence. The message didn't include a timeline, but if they're using old human technology, it could be anywhere, from a few months to several years. What are our options? The room fell quiet. What could they do? The debt was real, recorded in the most secure archives of Concordat law. 500,000 years of interest had turned it into something that couldn't be ignored or written off. But more importantly, the humans had survived something that should have killed them. That suggested they had changed, grown, evolved beyond what anyone expected. As the council debated, deep space monitoring stations began picking up strange readings from the galactic rim. Something was moving through the darkness between stars, something big enough to register on sensors from impossible distances. The humans were coming home, and they were bringing friends. The debt would be settled one way or another. The only question now was whether the Concordat would survive the payment. 3 months after the first message, the deep space sensors at the edge of Concordat territory detected something that made veteran operators question their own eyes. Long-range scanners were picking up what looked like a massive fleet moving through space, but the readings made no sense. How many ships? Asked Admiral Vorthak, studying the tactical display in the war room deep beneath Nexus Prime. That's the problem, sir, replied sensor technician Mordak, his tentacles writhing nervously. The computers keep changing the count. One moment it shows 3 million vessels. The next it shows 12 million. Sometimes the same ship appears to be in 17 different locations at once. Vorthak stared at the holographic display showing the approaching fleet. The ships themselves looked wrong somehow, as if they existed in more dimensions than his eyes could properly see. They moved in formations that hurt to look at, following paths through space that seemed to fold reality around them. What about their technology? He asked the science team. Chief Scientist Dr. Nexara stepped forward, her crystalline form reflecting the light from the displays. Admiral, what we're seeing shouldn't be possible. These ships appear to be moving faster than light without using any known form of jump drive. They're not opening wormholes or folding space. They're simply moving through normal space at speeds that violate everything we know about physics. Could our sensors be wrong? We've checked everything 3 times, sir. The readings are accurate. These ships are using technology that's at least 10,000 years ahead of anything in Concordat space. Vorthak felt his confidence wavering. The Concordat had always prided itself on being the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They were the ones who uplifted primitive species, who brought order and progress to chaos. How could humans, a species that had been barely able to build simple spaceships 500,000 years ago, now possess technology that made the Concordat look primitive? Recommendations? He asked his staff. We should prepare our defenses, said General Crixnall, commander of the Concordat army. Gather the fleet. Show them we're not afraid. What if they're not hostile? Asked Chief Diplomat Yelsari. The message only mentioned paying their debt. Maybe they really just want to settle their accounts and leave. With a fleet that size? Crixnall snorted. Nobody brings millions of warships to make a payment. Vorthak made his decision. Send out the call. I want every available ship from every member world. We'll meet them at the Meridian system right at the border of our space. If they want to talk, we'll talk. But we'll do it from a position of strength. The mobilization began immediately. From hundreds of worlds across concordate space, warships began moving toward the Meridian system. It was the largest fleet assembly in galactic history, 3,200,000 vessels representing over 400 different species. Battle cruisers from the warlike Krexani, sleek destroyers from the technology-focused Zephyrians, massive dreadnoughts from the industrial Morthek worlds. It was a show of force that should have impressed anyone, human or otherwise. 2 weeks later, the fleets met in the empty space between stars. Admiral Vorthak stood on the bridge of the Concordate flagship Eternal Unity, watching as his sensors finally got a clear look at the approaching human vessels. What he saw made his stomach drop. The human ships were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They seemed to be made of light and metal woven together, surfaces that reflected stars that weren't there, curves that suggested movement even when they were perfectly still. They moved through space like living things, flowing around each other in patterns that looked more like a dance than a military formation. "Sir," called out his tactical officer. "They're hailing us. Put them through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Vorthak was looking at something that might have once been human. The being on the screen looked mostly like the humans from the old records. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with eyes and a mouth. But there was something else there, something that made Vorthak's enhanced vision hurt when he tried to focus on it. The human seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, as if he was seeing only part of something much larger. "Greetings, Admiral Vorthak," the human said, and somehow it knew his name. "I am Commander Sarah Chen, representing the human collective. We have come to discuss our outstanding debt to the Galactic Concordate." Vorthak tried to project confidence. "You're surrounded by the most powerful fleet in galactic history. If you've come to negotiate, you should know that the Concordate doesn't respond well to threats." The human smiled, and the expression was somehow both kind and terrifying. "Admiral, we haven't come to threaten anyone. We've come to pay what we owe. However, there seems to be some dispute about the final amount. The debt is 847 trillion galactic standard units," Vorthak said firmly, "plus interest and penalties for abandonment." "Yes, we're aware of your calculations," Commander Chen replied. "However, we have some items to discuss regarding the original loan terms. But first, we should probably address the elephant in the room." "The what?" An old human expression. "We should talk about your fleet, Admiral. It's very impressive. 3 million ships representing the combined military might of 400 species. We're honored that you consider us worthy of such attention." Vorthak felt a chill. "You've been counting our ships?" "Of course. We've been watching you for quite some time, Admiral. Much longer than you might think." The human's smile widened. "But we're not here to fight. We're here to demonstrate something important." Before Vorthak could ask what she meant, alarms began ringing across his ship. Tactical displays lit up with warnings as something impossible began happening to the Concordate fleet. One by one, the massive warships were simply stopping. Not destroyed, not damaged, but somehow frozen in space, as if time itself had stopped. Around them, weapon systems went offline, engines shut down, communication arrays fell silent. "What are you doing to us?" Vorthak demanded. But even as he spoke, he could feel his own ship beginning to slow. "We're not hurting anyone, Admiral," Commander Chen said gently. "We're simply demonstrating that violence isn't necessary. Your ships and crews are perfectly safe. They'll be able to move again once we've finished our conversation." Vorthak watched in horror as his incredible fleet, the pride of galactic civilization, was rendered helpless in less than 4 hours. 3 million warships floating dead in space like toys a child had forgotten to put away. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "Many things are possible, Admiral, when you have time to learn and grow. We've had 500,000 years to study, to explore, to understand the universe in ways the Concordate never imagined. We've learned that the strongest weapon isn't the one that destroys, but the one that makes destruction unnecessary." The human leaned forward, and for a moment Vorthak could see something vast and ancient behind her eyes, an intelligence that spanned centuries and contained multitudes. "Now, shall we discuss that debt? We have some interesting calculations of our own to share with you." The being that stepped off the human transport ship looked almost normal. Almost. Sarah Chen appeared to be a standard human female, about average height, with dark hair and calm brown eyes. But the moment she entered the Great Council Chamber of Nexus Prime, every sensor in the room began giving impossible readings. High Counselor Yethrai watched the displays with growing confusion. The scanners showed Chen existing in 17 different dimensions at once. Her brain activity registered as millions of separate thought patterns working together. The life signs detector couldn't decide if she was one person or a billion. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," HFY said, trying to keep his voice steady. Around the massive circular table sat representatives from every major species in the Concordat, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. All of them were staring at Chen with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Chen replied, setting a small device on the table. Her voice was pleasant, but there was something underneath it, like hearing an ocean through a shell. "I should introduce myself properly. I am Sarah Chen, but I am also the keeper of accounts for the human collective. I speak with the voice of our entire species." "How many of you are there?" asked Trade Minister Golthak, his 6 eyes blinking rapidly. "That's a complex question," Chen said with a smile. "Are you asking how many individual humans exist, or how many minds are currently participating in this conversation?" The first number is approximately 47 billion. The second is closer to 12 billion. The council chamber fell silent. 47 billion humans. Even if they were scattered across multiple worlds, that represented a population larger than most Concordat member species. "Where have you been all this time?" asked military advisor Kexrin. "Learning," Chen said simply. "Growing, exploring. When we left Concordat space 500,000 years ago, we were angry and hurt. We felt cheated by the terms of our uplift agreement. So we decided to find our own way in the universe." She touched her device and holographic displays filled the air above the table. Images of vast cities floating in space, worlds covered in impossible architecture, fleets of ships moving between galaxies like schools of fish. We traveled beyond the galactic rim, into the spaces between star clusters where nobody else dared to go. We found other species out there, refugees and exiles like ourselves. We learned from them, and they learned from us. Over time, we built something new. The images showed civilizations that defied understanding, cities that existed in multiple dimensions, beings of pure energy working alongside creatures of living, crystal, technologies that seemed to run on mathematics itself. "We became shepherds," Chen continued, "protectors of species that others had given up on. We've helped 12,847 different civilizations survive and thrive. We've prevented 47 galactic wars. We've uplifted 3,421 species to spacefaring status, and we did it without debt, without contracts, without making them pay for the privilege of joining the cosmic community." High Counselor HFY felt his throat go dry. "You're claiming to have uplifted over 3,000 species?" "I'm not claiming anything," Chen said gently. "I'm simply stating facts. Would you like to meet some of them?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication system activated. The main screen showed dozens of different alien faces, species, that looked nothing like anything in Concordat records. They spoke in languages the computer couldn't translate, but somehow their meaning was clear. They were thanking the humans. All of them. "These are our friends," Chen explained as the testimonials continued. "Species that were dying when we found them, civilizations that had given up hope. We taught them what we had learned, that the universe is big enough for everyone, that cooperation is stronger than competition, that knowledge shared freely grows faster than knowledge hoarded." The images changed, showing vast libraries that existed in folded space. Universities where energy beings taught matter-based life forms, research stations where the laws of physics were rewritten on a daily basis. "We've learned things, Counselor HFY. Things about the universe that would astound you. We've discovered how to manipulate matter at the quantum level, how to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, how to share consciousness across vast distances while maintaining individual identity. We've become something greater than what we were, but we've never forgotten what we were." Defense Minister Vraktar leaned forward. "If you're so powerful, why are you here? Why not simply erase your debt and move on?" Chen's expression grew serious. "Because debt is more than numbers on a ledger, Minister. It's about responsibility, about accountability, about the relationships between civilizations. We borrowed from you. We took your technology and your knowledge. That created an obligation, and we've come to honor it." She touched her device again, and new numbers appeared in the air, complex calculations that made the Concordat's finest economists dizzy just looking at them. "Your records show that we owe 847 trillion galactic standard units, but we've done our own accounting. The value of the species we've saved, the wars we've prevented, The knowledge we've shared freely with the universe, all of it calculated using standard concordant economic models, comes to 12.7 quadrillion GSU. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. 12 quadrillion, more wealth than the concordant had ever dreamed of. We don't owe you money, Chen said quietly. You owe us. But that's not why we're here. High Counselor HFY found his voice. Then, why? Chen looked around the table, her gaze touching each representative in turn. Because we've been watching you. For 500,000 years we've observed the concordant from the outside. We've seen how your uplift system really works. Species that are given technology they can't afford, trapped in debt cycles that last for millennia. Civilizations that become economic slaves, working forever to pay for their own advancement. The council chamber erupted in angry voices, representatives standing and shouting denials, but Chen continued speaking, her voice somehow cutting through the noise without getting louder. You've turned the gift of civilization into a weapon of control. You've made progress itself into a commodity to be bought and sold. That's not uplift, counselors. That's exploitation. You're wrong, HFY protested. The concordant has brought peace and prosperity to hundreds of worlds. Peace for whom? Chen asked. Prosperity for whom? How many species have spent their entire existence working to pay off debts they never asked for? How many worlds have been stripped of their resources to make payments to civilizations that are already wealthy beyond measure? She stood up, and for a moment the chamber filled with an overwhelming sense of presence, as if billions of minds were focused on this one moment. The universe is vast and full of wonders, counselors. There's room for everyone to thrive. Knowledge, enough for all to share. Resources enough for all to prosper, but only if we stop treating civilization like a business and start treating it like what it should be. A gift freely given to those who need it. Chen smiled, and despite everything, it was a warm expression. We've come home to settle more than a financial debt. We've come to settle the debt the galaxy owes to its own conscience, and we're going to start by showing you what genuine uplift looks like. It started on Veltan 7, a mining world where the HFY people had been digging crystals out of their planet's core for 3,000 years to pay off their uplift debt. The miners went to work one morning and found their tunnels filled with strange, beautiful light. When they investigated, they discovered something impossible. The mining equipment had been replaced overnight with machines that seemed to be made of living metal. These new devices could extract crystals without damaging the surrounding rock, could process ore without creating toxic waste, could produce in one day what used to take a month. More importantly, when the HFY checked their planetary debt records, they found nothing but zeros. According to every computer system in concordant space, their debt had never existed. The same thing began happening across the galaxy. On Mordex, the oceanic world where the aquatic collective had been harvesting rare algae for centuries, the people woke to find their debt erased and their oceans cleaner than they had been in 1,000 years. New technology had appeared overnight, systems that could produce everything they needed without taking anything from their world's delicate ecosystem. On the industrial world of Craxishan, where the insectoid workers had labored in factories, for millennia, the assembly lines had been replaced with fabrication units that could create anything the planet needed using nothing but energy and raw elements from space dust. Their debt was gone, and for the first time in their recorded history, no Craxishaner had to work unless they chose to. High Counselor HFY stood in the emergency command center of Nexus Prime, watching reports flood in from across concordant space. Hundreds of worlds all reporting the same thing. Their debts were gone, their people were free, and technology beyond their understanding had appeared to help them thrive. How are they doing this? He demanded. Chief Technology Officer Nalseth looked up from her displays, her forearms working frantically to process the incoming data. We don't know, sir. There's no sign of forced entry into our computer systems, no evidence of hacking or data manipulation. It's as if the debt records are simply choosing to delete themselves. That's impossible. So is everything else that's happening, replied Intelligence Director Morkest. Sir, we're detecting human agents on over 400 worlds simultaneously. But here's the strange part. Most of them don't look human. The main display showed surveillance footage from dozens of different planets. On some worlds, beings that appeared to be native species were distributing advanced technology and teaching people how to use it. On others, creatures of pure energy were healing environmental damage that had built up over centuries. On still others, the humans appeared as beings of light, working to free enslaved populations and establish fair governments. They're shapeshifters, breathed military advisor Kexrin. More than that, Nalseth corrected. According to our deep scans, they're not changing their shape. They're changing their fundamental nature. These agents can exist as energy, as matter, or as something in between. They can become whatever a world needs them to be. Yethrai felt his carefully ordered universe cracking around him. What about resistance? Are any of our member worlds fighting back? That's the problem, sir, Morkest said quietly. Nobody wants to fight them. The humans aren't conquering these worlds. They're liberating them. Every species they've touched is experiencing unprecedented prosperity and freedom. Who's going to resist that? The reports kept coming. World after world, species after species, all telling the same story. The humans would arrive quietly, usually appearing as trusted members of the local community. They would begin by helping with small problems, fixing broken equipment, healing the sick, cleaning up pollution. Then they would start addressing larger issues: corrupt governments, unfair economic systems, environmental destruction. They never used force. They never demanded anything in return. They simply made things better, then moved on to help someone else. On the corporate world of Zeldara, where the business elite had grown fat on the profits from dozens of indebted species, executives woke to find their personal accounts drained and their assets redistributed to the worlds they had exploited. But instead of leaving them destitute, the humans had also provided them with new opportunities. Chances to make honest livings helping others instead of exploiting them. On the military stronghold of Vextar, where the warrior caste had ruled, through strength for 10,000 years, the humans appeared not as conquerors but as teachers. They showed the proud warriors how true strength came from protecting the weak, not dominating them. Within days, the planet's armies had become peacekeeping forces, working to help settle disputes across their sector instead of creating new conflicts. Even more remarkable was what happened on the Concordate's prison worlds. Instead of simply freeing the inmates, the humans worked to understand why each being had been imprisoned. Those who had committed crimes out of desperation found themselves given opportunities to build better lives. Those who had been imprisoned for political reasons were freed and often became leaders in their world's new governments. Even the truly dangerous criminals weren't simply released. They were offered chances for genuine rehabilitation, guided by beings who somehow understood their pain and anger. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Veltar, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through." Sarah Chen appeared on the screen, but now she looked different somehow. More solid, more present, as if she had been holding back before and was now allowing her true nature to show. "Good afternoon, High Counselor," she said pleasantly. "I hope you're having a productive day. What are you doing to our civilization?" Yethrai demanded. "We're showing you what it could be," Chen replied. "What it should have been all along. Every species has the right to thrive, Counselor. Every world deserves to reach its potential. We're simply removing the barriers that have been preventing that from happening. You're destroying everything we've built." Chen's expression grew sad. "No, Counselor. We're revealing what you built. A system designed to keep species dependent and indebted, to extract wealth from the weak and give it to the strong. That's not civilization. That's exploitation with better marketing." Behind her, other figures began to appear on the screen. Representatives from dozens of species, all of them smiling, all of them free. Yethrai recognized many of them. Former debtors, former slaves, former victims of the Concordate's economic system. "We're not your enemies," Chen continued. "We're your teachers. And the first lesson is this: true power isn't the ability to control others. It's the ability to help others control their own destinies." "What do you want from us?" Yethrai asked, quietly. "We want you to join us," Chen said. "Not as subjects, not as debtors, but as equals. The universe is vast, Counselor, and full of wonders you can't imagine. But those wonders are meant to be shared, not hoarded. Come with us, and we'll show you what civilization really looks like." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Outside the windows, Yethrai could see the lights of Nexus Prime continuing to function normally. But he knew that everything had changed. The humans weren't conquering the galaxy. They were healing it. And deep down, despite his fear and confusion, Yethrai was beginning to understand that this might be exactly what the galaxy needed. 6 months after the humans returned, High Counselor Yethrai stood before the largest gathering of sentient beings in galactic history. The new assembly hall on Nexus Prime had been built using human technology, and it existed in 7 dimensions. simultaneously, allowing representatives from over 15,000 species to attend in person while countless more joined through quantum-linked consciousness networks. The old Concordat had represented 847 worlds. This new gathering included species from across multiple galactic clusters, civilizations that had been too afraid of the Concordat's debt system to ever make contact, refugees who had fled to the outer rim to escape economic slavery, and entire, stellar nations that had developed in isolation rather than risk the price of civilization. HFY looked out at the incredible diversity before him. Beings of pure energy mingled with creatures of living crystal. Hive minds shared space with radical individualists. Species that breathed methane sat comfortably next to those who required liquid nitrogen to survive. The humans had somehow created an environment where everyone could exist together, safely and comfortably. At the center of it all stood Sarah Chen, though HFY now understood that she was much more than a single individual. She was a focal point for billions of human minds, a living embodiment of everything humanity had learned during their long exile. "Friends," Chen began, and somehow her voice reached every being in the vast chamber regardless of how they perceived sound. "We gather today not to mourn the end of the old ways but to celebrate the beginning of something new." The assembled representatives listened in perfect silence. After 6 months of human intervention, every one of them had experienced prosperity beyond their wildest dreams. Worlds that had struggled for millennia were now thriving. Species that had been on the edge of extinction were building new colonies among the stars. Technologies that had been restricted to the wealthy were now freely available to anyone who needed them. The Galactic Concordat served its purpose for a time, Chen continued. It brought order to chaos, connected isolated worlds, and spread knowledge across the galaxy. But it also carried within itself the seeds of its own corruption. It made the mistake of treating progress as a commodity, civilization as a business transaction, and knowledge as property to be hoarded. HFY felt a strange mix of shame and relief. For months he had watched his old certainties crumble as the humans revealed the true cost of the Concordat system. Entire species trapped in eternal servitude, worlds stripped bare to pay impossible debts, civilizations that had never been given a real chance to thrive because they spent all their energy serving their creditors. "Today, we establish something different," Chen announced. "Not a government that rules, but a network that connects. Not an economy that enslaves, but a system that empowers. Not a hierarchy that divides, but a community that unites." She gestured, and holographic displays filled the air above the assembly. The images showed a new kind of civilization, one based on cooperation rather than competition, sharing rather than hoarding, growth rather than control. "We call it the Covenant of Equals," Chen explained. "Every species, regardless of size or technological development, has an equal voice. Every world, no matter how remote or resource poor, deserves the support of the galactic community. Every individual, whether organic or artificial, energy-based or matter-based, has the right to pursue their own path to fulfillment." The displays showed how it would work. Resource-sharing networks that ensured no world ever faced scarcity. Knowledge banks that were freely accessible to anyone who wanted to learn. Transportation systems that could carry beings safely between the stars without requiring centuries of debt payments. "But what about defense?" called out General Crixnell from his seat in the old Concordat section. "What about maintaining order? Someone has to be in charge when decisions need to be made. Quickly." Chen smiled, and the expression contained centuries of wisdom. "General, we've learned something important during our time away. The strongest defense isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the ability to turn them into friends. The best order isn't imposed from above. It emerges naturally when everyone has a stake in maintaining it." She gestured again, and the displays showed human peacekeeping forces in action across the galaxy. But these weren't armies in the traditional sense. They were teachers, mediators, healers. When conflicts arose, they worked to understand the root causes and address them, rather than simply suppressing the symptoms. "We've also learned," Chen continued, "that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than any of us imagined. Beyond the galactic rim, there are civilizations that exist in dimensions we can barely perceive. There are beings of such ancient wisdom that they make us look like children. There are phenomena that challenge everything we think we know about reality." The images showed glimpses of these wonders. Cities that existed in folded time, beings that could manipulate probability itself, machines that ran on pure mathematics. It was beautiful and terrifying and utterly alien. "These are our neighbors," Chen said. Some of them have been watching us for millions of years, waiting to see if we would ever grow wise enough to join the greater community that exists beyond our small corner of space. The Covenant of Equals isn't just about our galaxy. It's about preparing ourselves to take our place in something infinitely larger. HFY felt his mind struggling to grasp the implications. The humans weren't just changing how galactic civilization worked. They were preparing everyone for contact with civilizations so advanced that the difference between the old Concordat and a primitive tribe was negligible. "What about leadership?" asked Trade Minister Golthak. "Who makes decisions for the Covenant?" "Everyone," Chen replied simply. "And no one. We've developed systems that allow billions of minds to work together on complex problems without losing individual identity or agency. Decisions emerge from the collective wisdom of the group, but individuals remain free to follow their own paths." She paused, looking out at the vast assembly. "We won't lie to you. This is harder than the old way. Democracy is messier than autocracy. Cooperation requires more effort than domination, but the results are worth it. Every being reaches their full potential. Every species contributes their unique gifts to the whole. Every world becomes a part of something greater than itself, without losing what makes it special." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. 15,000 species, speaking with 15,000 different voices, all choosing the same future. The ceremony concluded and beings began to file out of the assembly hall. HFY found himself standing beside Chen. Up close, he could see the profound changes that 500,000 years had wrought on humanity. She was still recognizably human, but she was also something more. A bridge between what organic life had been and what it could become. "Was this always your plan?" he asked quietly. "When you left all those millennia ago, did you know you would come back to change everything?" Chen considered the question carefully. "We knew we would return someday," she said. "We had obligations to fulfill, debts to settle. But we didn't know what we would become during our journey, or what we would choose to do when we got home." She smiled, and for a moment HFY could see the simple human woman she had once been, before evolution and transcendence had made her into something greater. "We came back to pay our debts," she said. "But we discovered that the real debt wasn't financial. It was moral. The galaxy had forgotten what civilization was supposed to be about, helping others reach their potential, not exploiting their weaknesses." She looked out at the stars visible through the great windows of the assembly hall. "The debt is settled now, Counselor, all of it. The money we owed, the opportunities we were denied, the suffering we allowed to continue when we had the power to stop it. The accounts are balanced." HFY nodded, understanding. The humans hadn't just returned to Earth's children. They had become parents to the entire galaxy, guiding it toward a future none of them could have imagined. "What happens now?" he asked. Chen's smile widened, and suddenly HFY could sense the vast network of consciousness that stood behind her, billions of human minds working together, connected to countless other species, all focused on the same goal. "Now we go exploring," she said. "The universe is vast and full of wonders, Counselor, and for the first time in galactic history, we're finally wise enough to appreciate them." Above them, the stars shone with new promise. Somewhere out there, ancient civilizations waited to welcome the galaxy's children home. And thanks to humanity's long journey into darkness and back into light, everyone was finally ready for the invitation. The debt was settled, the accounts were balanced, and the way, real adventure was just beginning.